Hi, I'm Lisa. Welcome back to Biblical Reality Check. Before we explore the psychological and metaphysical layers of Cain and Abel, let's briefly revisit the story itself, found in Genesis chapter 4. Cain and Abel are the two sons of Adam and Eve. Both bring offerings to God. Abel offers the best of his flock, while Cain offers produce from the ground. God looks with favor on Abel and his offering, but not on Cain or his offering, and Cain becomes angry and resentful. In the story, God warns Cain that he is standing at a crossroads, telling him, "If you act rightly, you will be accepted, but if not, sin lies in wait at the door. Its urge is for you, yet you can rule over it." Cain refuses the warning, lets his anger consume him, and lures Abel into a field where he kills him. When confronted, Cain denies responsibility, saying, "Am I my brother's keeper?" As a result, he becomes a wanderer, not because God destroys him, but because he has destroyed the part of himself that could have kept him grounded. Now, let's look at what this story is actually describing beneath the surface. Cain and Abel aren't actual physical siblings. They are two modes of being inside every one of us. Abel represents alignment, authenticity, and inner coherence. Cain represents ego, performance, and the desperate attempt to be seen. The text never says God prefers meat over crops. The difference in favor isn't because of the offering itself, it's because of the state of the giver of the offering. Cain's reaction reveals the deeper issue. Instead of self-reflection, he collapses into comparison. Instead of curiosity, he chooses resentment. Instead of alignment, he chooses performance. This is the same folly of his parents, Adam and Eve, who are guilty of the refusal to look inward. When God warns Cain in chapter 4, verse 7, "If you do what is right, will you not be accepted?" The translation is, "You are not being rejected, you're being invited." But Cain can't hear the hum. He only hears the noise of his own wounded ego. God continues in verse 7, "Sin is crouching at your door, but you must master it." This is the first psychological description of the unintegrated shadow. The shadow is the unconscious, repressed, or denied part of the personality, containing traits the conscious ego deems unacceptable, such as selfishness, rage, or primal instincts. Coined by Carl Jung, this dark side represents the not me self, often projected onto others, but it also hides positive, unexpressed potential. Cain stands at a crossroads. Integrate the shadow or be consumed by it. Cain chooses the latter. He kills Abel, but symbolically, he kills the part of himself he refuses to become. When Cain kills Abel, he represses the voice that could have saved him. Every human being reenacts this story when they fail to integrate the shadow aspect of themselves in order to make the two, wisdom and folly, into one. By doing so, they gain control over their feelings, thoughts, and actions rather than being controlled by them. That's how one rules over sin, in God's words. Cain and Abel is not a tragedy, it's a warning. The Text says that God banishes Cain and makes him a constant wanderer on the earth. However, the exile isn't divine wrath. It's the natural consequence of inner fragmentation. When you repress or deny the aligned part of yourself, you lose your center. You wander, you drift, you become a fugitive from your own truth. Cain is not banished from God. He's banished from himself. Cain goes on to build a city. This is crucial. He builds externally what he cannot build internally. He constructs walls because he has no inner foundation. He creates structure because he has no inner stability. Cain becomes the archetype of the human being who tries to solve an internal problem with external architecture. This is the blueprint that eventually becomes the Tower of Babel, and which we will be discussing in our next video. The story of Cain and Abel introduces the polarity that runs through the entire Bible. Abel equals wisdom, Cain equals folly. Wisdom is alignment, coherence, authenticity, and truth. Folly is fragmentation, noise, ego, and performance. Wisdom integrates the shadow. Folly projects it. This polarity becomes the foundation for Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Job, and ultimately Babel. God's question to Cain, "Where's your brother?" is not about Abel. It's about the part of Cain that Cain abandoned. It's the same question God asks Adam and Eve in the garden when God asks, "Where are you?" And it's the same question asked of every human being. Where is the part of you that knows the truth? Where is the part of you that listens? Where's the part of you that you silenced? Cain's answer, "I do not know," is the most honest line in the story. He truly doesn't know. He's lost access to himself. The narrative goes on to say that Cain's descendants build tools, instruments, and weapons. Humanity becomes more technologically capable, but not more aligned. By the time we reach Babel, the pattern is complete. External achievement, internal emptiness, collective ego, and collapse of coherence. Cain is the seed, Babel is the tree. This is why the next episode, Babel, Collective Folly, and the Collapse of Coherence, is the natural continuation of this story. So, in conclusion, Cain and Abel is not about murder, it's about misalignment. It shows that we cannot fake alignment, we can't perform our way into acceptance, we can't silence the truth without silencing ourselves, and we cannot build anything stable on a fractured foundation. Cain is the archetype of the unintegrated self. Abel is the archetype of the aligned self. And the entire biblical narrative unfolds from the first fracture. Thanks for watching.